Good afternoon, everyone. This is ALCOSAN's Finance Committee meeting. Today is Friday, June the 6th, 2025. We will begin with a roll call.
Darren Kelly,
Here.
Emily Kincaid,
Here.
Dr. Shanna Tharp Gilliam,
Present.
Ms. Sylvia Wilson.
Here. All right, thank you so much. Today we have 3 items, informational items, and 2 action items. We'll begin with information. Bond market update.
Madam Chair and committee, it is that time. I can now say it's that time of year because we will be in the market annually. And I will turn things over to the Director of Finance, Karen Fantoni. It's all yours.
Thank you, Ms. Arletta. Thank you, Finance Committee. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. We'd like to give you an update as to where we are with the bonds. As the Executive Director mentioned, we will be in the market annually to fund the Clean Water Program as we move forward. As we all know, we are going to be having substantial capital expenditures over the next 10 plus years, and we need to make sure that we have the ability to continue to fund that program as it moves forward. With us today, we have Charlie Goodwin, who is our financial advisor. He is with FSL Public Finance, and I am going to let him walk us through the informational items, and then after that has concluded, we will come back to the action items as part of the agenda. If you have any questions as we move through the informational items, please feel free just to ask as we go through those items, as I know some of this information can get to be a little bit technical. All right, thank you. Charlie, if you could take it away, please.
Thanks, Karen. So as Karen mentioned, my name is Charlie Goodwin, and we do act as ALCOSAN's financial advisor. So as Karen mentioned, we want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the bond market, talk a little bit about ALCOSAN's existing debt, discuss the new bond issue that ALCOSAN will be bringing to market sometime later this summer. Then talk about the team of professionals that are going to be involved to bring those bonds to market and get that funded. And then just summarize the 2 resolutions that will be presented to the board at the June 26th board meeting, if this committee so recommends those resolutions going forward. So with that, why don't we jump in a little bit, background on me. I've been involved with ALCOSAN since 1997. I recently joined FSL Public Finance after spending about 29 years at BNY Mellon. And in that capacity at BNY Mellon, we were your financial advisor from 2005 until 2005 until 2025. So in terms of FSL Public Finance, we are just an advisory firm, so our sole goal here is to serve the interests of ALCOSAN and make sure that you get the best bond deal possible in terms of structure, interest rate, and getting you the money you need to move forward on the Clean Water Plan. So moving forward to talk about the bond issue and bond market, what we're seeing in the bond market right now is an awful lot of volatility. Interest rates have been going up and down a lot, really driven by a lot of what's going on in Washington, D.C. around tariffs, tax policies, and concerns about economic slowdown. As you can see, the chart on the right is the interest rate, the yield on the U.S. Treasury 10-year bond over the last year. And generally, yields sort of fluctuate by maybe a basis point or 2. That is 1/100th of a percent. But given some of the changes in tax and economic policy, it's beginning to look a lot like a roller coaster more than a smooth change. As a matter of fact, I put this slide together 2 days ago, and today rates are up over about 4.5% for the U.S. Treasury 10-year as a result of what were some pretty strong job numbers. The big thing that's going to drive where rates are going is the Federal Reserve and what their views are on interest rates. At the beginning of the year, the bond market had expected the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates this year, but given some of the inflationary pressure that's being experienced, they're pretty much on hold as they're waiting to see what impact the proposed tariffs will have on the overall inflation picture. So that's what's going on in the general bond market. What's really important for ALCOSAN is what's going on in the municipal bond market. That is where interest rates are for tax-exempt bonds. The good news is ALCOSAN is able to issue bonds on a tax-exempt basis so that the interest on those bonds is exempt from their holders' federal and state income taxation. There is a lot, I think, people have been concerned about the big, beautiful bill that's going through the U.S. Congress. The one part of that bill will be to make permanent the tax cuts, income tax cuts that were contained in the 2017 Tax Act. That's somewhat negative for the tax-exempt bond market, but on the positive side to that, there are no proposed changes, at least in the House version, for how municipal bonds and ALCOSAN's bonds would be treated for tax purposes. However, people are concerned that maybe the Senate, as it evaluates the bill, may try to put some less favorable provisions around tax-exempt bonds as a way to generate revenue to offset some of the reductions in revenue that are contained in the House bill. What we're seeing is that other municipal bond issuers are starting to get to the market early in case that there are negative provisions that are included in the Senate version. And so this chart on the right is the amount of issuance that's projected from Pennsylvania bond issuers over the past year. Traditionally, it's been pretty calm, running about 500 to $1 billion on average. We saw a spike last October in run up to the federal elections. And now, as you see on the far right, a big jump in issuance from Pennsylvania bond issuers up over 2.6 billion this week as a result of other Pennsylvania municipal bond issuers trying to get into the market so that they can beat any potential changes. This could impact the interest rate ALCOSAN gets on its bonds later this year. The good news is that a lot of municipal bonds, especially from Pennsylvania issuers, are expected to mature in July and August. So we're hopeful that there'll be reinvestment money, that is money that investors will have from bonds that have matured in order to purchase new bonds from ALCOSAN. So that's really what we're seeing are the primary drivers in the bond market that will impact ALCOSAN. Moving forward, talking just a moment or two about ALCOSAN's existing bond portfolio. You've got bonds going back from that were issued in 2015. There's a bond issue that was done in 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, which was the most recent bond issue. These bond issues, especially the last couple ones, have averaged about $250 million of par amount of bonds being offered to investors, and the big portion of those proceeds were used to fund the Clean Water Plan. And as Karen mentioned, we'll be looking to do a new bond issue going forward this summer to fund the rest of the capital plans for 2025 and 2026 for the Clean Water Plan, as well as we're going to hopefully refinance the 2015 bonds to generate some interest rate savings for ALCOSAN. So as I mentioned, the 2025 bonds will look to be about 300 million to fund the Clean Water Plan, 113 million to refinance the 2015s. We might have to do a reserve fund that's equal to 1 year of principal and interest, unless we can get some amendments to the ALCOSAN's 1997 trust indenture done. That will be about 38 million. And then finally, the cost of issuance of the bonds be about 2 million. So we're looking at somewhere around 450 to 500 million of the par amount for the proposed 2025 bonds. These bonds will look a lot like prior bond issues that ALCOSAN has done. They're going to be fixed rate, long-term bonds with repayments starting in 2028 and running all the way out to 2056. Because a lot of what's going to be started to be funded with the proceeds of these bonds, like the tunnel construction, for the Ohio River Tunnel, will have a long-term benefit to ALCOSAN. We think it's prudent for ALCOSAN to issue long-term debt to pay for those tunnels. We expect the interest rate in today's market to be about 5%, which will be the cost of ALCOSAN to ALCOSAN from issuing the bonds, and that will be the interest rate roughly that investors will receive on the bonds. These will be done on parity with all your prior debt under the 1997 indenture, which means these investors will all share with the other prior deals with the sewer charges that ALCOSAN collects from its ratepayers. We're hopeful in today's market that the refinancing of the 2015 bond should save about $6.5 million from that refinancing. We're going to try to target those savings to help the budget in the next 3 to 5 years, because hopefully we'll be looking to apply those savings so that there will not need to be as large potentially negative impact on ALCOSAN's budget during those years. So that's what, in generally, as of right now, we expect the 2025 bond issue to look like. Moving forward, as was mentioned earlier, on the action item coming up later will be a recommendation to the full board at the June board meeting to select the professionals for the bond financing team. Those professionals will include our firm as your financial advisor, Eckert Siemens, which is bond counsel to ALCOSAN, and they give the crucial opinion that the bonds are validly issued and binding on the authority, and also, as importantly, that the bonds will be tax exempt. The board appointed Eckert Siemens as your bond counsel in January of this year as a result of an RFP process. The bond trustee, which is the entity that holds your payments that you make to bondholders and then distributes those bond issues, will be BNY Mellon. They are your trustee for all your bonds issued under the 1997 bonds. Then CDM Smith will provide a master report to investors that talks about the impacts of the bonds, as well as projections of ALCOSAN's ability to repay the bonds. Then also ALCOSAN will recommend to the underwriters that Bruce Dyson Associates be their counsel because of the strong relationship that Bruce Dyson Associates has had with ALCOSAN. Which leads us to the remaining piece of the puzzle, which are the underwriters that ALCOSAN will need in the transaction. And the underwriters act as the intermediary between you as the bond issuer and your investors. The important roles that the underwriting syndicate plays will be to determine the interest rate on the bonds, and also to buy the bonds from ALCOSAN and resell them to investors. And what's important here is that the underwriters will agree to buy all the bonds from ALCOSAN, even if not all the bonds have been sold to investors. So it's very important that we find the right team of underwriters to get ALCOSAN the lowest bond issue rates possible in the market and have the financial capacity to handle any unsold bonds. To help inform the selection process, FSL on your behalf sent out a request for information to the firms on your qualified list, and 13 of the 15 firms responded, and those firms provided some very good responses that have some very insightful information that will help FSL and ALCOSAN put together the best deal possible for the authority. So given that this is going to be a large bond issue, as I said, in the $450 million range, we think it's appropriate to have about 6 firms involved in the transaction. And their roles would be as follows. We'd recommend that you have one senior manager that will be your primary contact and will really lead the process along with us and ALCOSAN to put the bond issue together. One co-senior manager that will assist the senior with various tasks such as helping with the rating agencies, as well as identifying investors to purchase the bonds. And then 4 co-managing underwriters that will help identify investors that aren't known to the senior or the co-senior, and will also share in the risk of any unsold bonds. As a result of that request for information that I mentioned earlier, we would like to recommend the following firms be appointed as the underwriting syndicate. In the senior manager role, we'd recommend JP Morgan Securities. They're a leading underwriter nationally, and they have an extremely large capital base to handle the size of this bond issue. Samuel Ramirez would be the co-senior. They've got some very strong sewer bond expertise and gave us some very interesting concepts as a result of their response to the request for information. They're also a minority-owned business enterprise. The next firm, PNC, would act as a co-manager. I think people are aware of PNC and their large presence here in Western Pennsylvania. They've also been an underwriter for many of ALCOSAN's prior deals, so they certainly know the authority well. Raymond James would also recommend as a co-manager. They have a very large retail investor network, both here in Pennsylvania, large offices here in the Western PA, as well as nationally. So they'll help the syndicate identify individual investors to buy the bonds. And then finally, the next 2 firms would be Siebert Williams as a co-manager. They've got very good experience working with other sewer authorities who are undergoing an EPA consent decree. And so they can help us make sure that what we're doing will work well with the modified consent decree. Also, Siebert Williams is a minority and women's-owned business enterprise, so helps meet the authority's goals in that regard. And then the final firm would be Huntington Securities, which is part of Huntington Bank. They have a large local presence, and they also have some very strong local banking capabilities that can be helpful to ALCOSAN going forward. So that is our recommended team for the authority to consider on the underwriting process. In terms of what we're looking at for a timetable for the bonds, certainly we'd like the authorities board to consider approving the issuance of the bonds at the board meeting in June on the 26th. With that approval in hand, we'd go forward with the rating agency meetings in mid-July, get all the finance team together in mid-July to work on the strategy for the bonds, get the rating in late July, finalize the documents and offering prospectus at that time also, send that preliminary official statement, which is all the information an investor needs to know to make an informed investment decision early August. Really try to get out and educate investors about the authority and the bond issue again in early August. price the bonds, that is, determine the interest rates on the bonds, and then sell those bonds to investors in mid-August, and then finally close the bond issue in mid-September, which is when ALCOSAN would get the proceeds of the bonds. So that's the timetable we're looking at here. In terms of the action items that the Finance Committee will be considering, there are two resolutions that'll be going. One will be to appoint the bond team and primarily the underwriting syndicate that we talked about, as well as that resolution will spell out the fee allocation that the firms will receive to underwrite the bonds and the priority of orders. So if we have more investors who want to buy particular bonds than bonds available to sell, the resolution will determine who gets the first chance to buy the bonds. And then finally, that resolution will authorize various board members to execute any agreements with the members of the underwriting syndicate as needed. The second resolution will be the one that will authorize the issuance of the bonds. ALCOSAN does this for each series of bonds, and the resolution is pretty much just in line with what you've done last year and years prior. It will set the not to exceed amount of bonds to be issued, which right now is looking to be 500 million. Again, we'll authorize the various board members who can sign on behalf of the authority, and it'll delegate the authority to a pricing committee to determine the final elements of the bond issue. The fees paid to the various professionals, as well as the interest rates on the bonds, and the final dollar amount of bonds to be issued. And then the final aspect that the resolution will do is to spell out how the bonds proceeds will be used, namely for clean water action plan, as well as the refinancing, the reserve fund, and the cost of issuance. So those are the elements of the resolution. Certainly, I'll be glad to answer any questions that the committee may have. And with if there aren't any questions, I'll turn it back to the chair to move forward with the action items.
Thank you. Before we do move forward, does anyone on the committee have any questions or comments, please?
I have a question. This goes back to the slide that was showing the volatility in the market. Is there a go, no-go point for the percentage? Like if it's higher than this or lower than this, then we should not, go through this process? Or is that not an issue? It just is what it is.
Yeah, that's a complicated question, Dr. G. Certainly, there is a no-go decision as it relates to the refinancing of the Series 2015 bonds. If rates do jump up to the point that it doesn't generate any savings from the refinancing of the bonds, we would carve that portion of the deal out and reduce the amount of bonds issued. As to the other portion of the bonds, namely the portion of the bonds that would be used to fund the clean water plan, right now, as I understand it, from the 2024 bonds, there's enough money to cover your capital expenditures through December, so that if rates aren't great in August when we're going to the market, we could probably put the deal on hold for a couple weeks, maybe a month or two, to see if rates improve. However, at some point, the authority is going to need money to move forward with the Ohio River Tunnel construction, because as I understand it, that drill is going to arrive sometime in 2026. So And that's going to be pretty expensive on a monthly basis to do that boring. So there's limited flexibility to adjust the timing based on bond market volatility.
Thank you.
Okay, any others? All right, hearing none, then will move into the action items. We'll start with item A, the motion to recommend the adoption of a resolution authorizing the issuance of the proposed Series 2025 bonds.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that motion as carried. Item B is a motion to recommend the adoption of a resolution appointing a bond underwriting syndicate as recommended by the authority's financial advisor, FSL Public Finance.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. That's been approved too. And these will be submitted to the full board in our June meeting for approval and for further discussion and approval. I do not believe we have any new business.
That is correct.
That's correct. All right, then I want to thank everyone for all the work that's done to put this together. Thank you, committee members, for being here today. And this meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee. Have a great weekend.